But there's another issue that we need to talk about with this car, and this is BMW Australia's fault.
Now, to keep costs down, manufacturers are making these engines modular. That means these engines share a lot of parts. Unfortunately, they also share a lot of the problems.
On public roads, I don't know why anyone would need more power and get up and go than this thing. Okay, you already know this, but just because something is very popular doesn't necessarily mean it's actually any good. Yes, BMW's 3 Series is obviously iconic, and this, the 7th and current generation, has been hugely popular in terms of sales. But even though the used prices do make these incredibly tempting, should you ever seriously consider buying one? Well, we are going to answer that, and obviously we're going to delve deep into the G20's details shortly. But first of all, the confronting stuff. What goes wrong with these? How about we start with the exterior? Okay, first of all, sunroofs are such a lovely feature, aren't they? But the problem is, both in sedan and wagon forms, owners have reported rattles and creaks and squeaks. Not all the time, just sporadically. Now, the good news here is that BMW have issued a service bulletin to fix this, but if you're more of a do-it-yourselfer, just fit some dry lubricant around the entire sunroof, especially this section where it basically comes to close, and that should fix the problem. Now, this generation 3 Series is incredibly closely related to the same generation 4 Series, and much of what we'll be going over will relate to the 4 Series, but there are some specific 4 Series issues. For example, on the earlier convertible models, the roof mechanism, it can have a few dramas, and if it does, it can be extremely expensive to repair. Okay, next up, owners have reported a few issues with the power folding mirrors. Apparently, they don't, or sometimes they both fold but then one only opens, or sometimes they're both open but one won't fold close, all those sorts of things. Also on the mirrors, the automatic dipping that activates when you put it in reverse, sometimes it just doesn't dip, or it dips and then it just doesn't go back to normal. Now, this issue can be caused sometimes by water getting in the mirror housing and it just plays havoc with the electronics. Other times, sometimes it's actually not the mirror's fault, it's the control panel inside the car. It can have some issues. Now, the issue with this control panel is that some owners claim that their BMW dealership would not come to the party in terms of fixing it under warranty, until they had a heated discussion with them, and then they turned around and finally fixed it. Next up, owners have reported that the active grille element can have its own special kind of tantrum. Sometimes they both open, but then only one side closes. Sometimes, this is really bad, both sides won't open at all. If this happens in a hot climate and you're driving hard, that can really impact the cooling of the engine, and guess what? That's not good. Now, this problem can sometimes just be an actuator issue. Other times it can be a software issue, but the software issues come with their own special kind of headache, which we'll get into shortly. Now, the, let's say, sort of good news here is that these issues seem to be far more prevalent on the pre-update cars. When you go to the post-LCI update, especially the LCI 2 update cars, nowhere near as many issues, apparently. Now, we will be covering the entire G20 3 Series generation in this video, but the eagle-eyed of you will have noticed that this is an M340i, and that's at the spicier end of the 3 Series family. Obviously not quite as spicy as the full-fat M3, but really that thing deserves its very own video. As does the very hard-hitting, close relation, the Alpina B3, which is all but a factory-sanctioned tuner version of this car. Now, this means if you're in the market, not only will you have 5 models and 4 engine packages to choose from, you could be presented with 4 different equipment packages. Not to mention, the original owner may have ticked a few of BMW's never-ending list of optional features. Actually, the range is so diverse, it's pretty safe to say it's near impossible to find 2 3 Series that are spec'd exactly the same. But this is why it's so important to find out as much about the vehicle's history as you possibly can. See, plenty of these on the used market have been purchased by people on lease arrangements that have no intention of keeping the car for the long term. Plus, BMW employ this stupid condition-based servicing system, and we'll get to why that's stupid later in the video. But all of this combined means that plenty of these on the used market have missed critical maintenance and servicing. So therefore, make sure the one you're looking at has at least a full service history. Make sure you get a pre-purchase inspection carried out, and get yourself a vehicle history check at ReDriven.com or via the link down below. That's going to tell you if there's any money owing on the car, if it's been written off, or even if it's stolen. Also, another link down there will take you to the free ReDriven cheat sheet on the 3 Series. It'll explain all of the specific details and so much more. It's basically the ultimate used 3 Series buying guide. Now, something that we alluded to at the start of the video, European cars here in Australia have a pretty shocking reputation when it comes to losing value on the used market. For example, a 2020 M340i, brand new here in Australia, was retailing for around about $110,000. That same car, with a few Ks on it these days, is asking around about $60,000. That's a loss in value of $50,000 in just 4 years. Now, obviously these figures, they will vary depending on the car's condition and kilometers and a million other factors, but the 3 Series range in general, it currently spans anywhere from about $30,000 to about $115,000. But there's another issue that we need to talk about with this car, and this is BMW Australia's fault. Why the hell didn't you bring out the M340i in wagon form? I mean, look at how incredibly popular the M3 Touring is. Surely if you'd brought this in a wagon form to Australia, it would have sold like hotcakes. A, because as we all know, fast wagons are simply the coolest cars in the world. And B, I think this in wagon form is actually better looking than the M3 Touring. Don't get me wrong, I do love the pumped arches on the M3 Touring, but overall that design is just so aggressive, it shouts its performance at you. This thing is just, it's more subtle, more sophisticated. Also, you'll avoid the ridiculously large nostrils that the M3 Touring has, and surely that's a good thing. And yes, before you go yelling at me in the comments, we do know that the Alpina B3 is basically this in wagon form, and yes, it's available in Australia, but then you've got to explain to your friends what Alpina is and why the B3 Touring is special, and that just gets annoying. You know what else is annoying? The stupid over-the-air software updates. Loads of owners have complained about this, and many of them are still having issues with it. Basically, certain updates can be done remotely, and you'll have the update done and you'll think it's been successful, but then you'll find things like the blind spot warnings will just only work intermittently. Then there are the owners that attempt to actually do the update, but the update won't start even over a matter of weeks, but you still get the alert that you've got to do the update. It's just so frustrating. Now, look, we know this isn't exclusive to BMW. Tesla, Volvo, Mercedes-Benz, they've all reported similar issues with their over-the-air software updates. So here's a tip to manufacturers. Maybe just simplify your vehicles. We don't necessarily need all of the tech, and we don't need it to be updated online, so just keep it simple, stupid. Now, another issue with the interiors of these cars, plenty of owners have reported that the wireless charging pad can make your phone so incredibly hot that it's near impossible to touch the phone, and it triggers the phone's temperature warning. And speaking of phone issues, a few owners have had problems with the wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto dropping out, and also on some of the really early examples, Bluetooth can drop out. Also on the phone connectivity in some of the earlier models, look, chances are Android Auto will work, but if the original owner of the car was an Apple user, they may not have activated Android Auto. It can be done down the track, but just check it works. Now, next up, not that anyone listens to the radio anymore, but of the several owners out there that do, apparently, no matter what order you put your radio stations in with the presets, it just rearranges them into numerical order. What I mean is, let's say you want to go from channel 105.7 to channel 96.9, it won't allow that, it just spins them around. So yeah, it's got to be in numerical order. Bloody annoying. However, there's a really easy fix to this. Just fall into line with the rest of society and stop listening to commercial radio. Also, while we're in the audio department, in the base model stereos, the cover over the center speaker, it can get a bit rattly. Super easy to fix, it just needs some felt tape. To learn how to do it, just jump on the owners groups because there are loads of great tutorials on there. Actually, just on the owners groups, you guys are bloody legends, especially the Australian G20 owners group. Thank you guys so much for all of your help and advice in making this video. We couldn't have made this without you. Also, as a massive thank you to my mate Maddie for lending us his car to film today. Mate, you're going home with a free set of these bad boys. Okay, it's time for another Wipertech challenge. Will it wipe? Today's victim, baked beans. Before we see how these wipe, remember Wipertech wiper blades are so easy to order online. They're a breeze to fit. And if you order a set via the link, you're going to get 15% off and free express shipping. Let's see if they wipe. Oh, that didn't work. Oh, okay. Sorry. Oh no, that was a disaster. Okay, go for it. These things absolutely nailed that, so they're easily going to handle anything that you can throw at them. Get yourself a set today. However, if you want a set of these for free, just be like Matt and own a cool car that you'd like to see featured on ReDriven, and also hopefully live in Sydney or Newcastle or somewhere close. If you've got a cool car that you think would make for a good ReDriven video, let us know in the comments, or better yet, message us on the socials. But back to complaints and issues with the interior, you know what? Not really many others. There are the odd sporadic report about bits of trim, like the actual silver coating coming off, but that's incredibly rare. And also, I'm going to call them first world complaints. A lot of M340i owners complain that they couldn't get these wonderful seats with ventilation. Stop complaining. But then there's all the positives with the interior, starting with iDrive. This is still simply one of my very favorite infotainment systems to actually use. Super intuitive, really simple when you need it to be, but if you do love your tech, there's so much depth to it. Also, this generation just has good buttons. If you want to change your driving modes, they're just there. You don't have to go scrolling through different menus. But then if you want to customize them, you can. And obviously, look, the 3 Series will come with all of the sort of features and equipment that you would expect, but something to just be aware of, when you look at companies like Alfa Romeo, Genesis and Lexus, because they're less popular companies, often they'll fit their cars with far more standard features than the German big 3 to tempt you over from those brands. But if you just must have a 3 Series, there are some optional extras that we'd highly recommend trying to hunt down. Firstly, the 16-speaker Harman Kardon sound system is absolutely epic if you love your tunes, and the more premium interior packages, they really do lift the overall vibe of the interior. Actually, just on the vibe of the interior, from a design aspect, I personally prefer the pre-update interior like this. I think the LCI update, because they swapped out this nice design work here where it all kind of flows as one, they just stuck a huge screen on there. It feels like BMW and the designers just went, oh my God, everyone's filling their cars with screens. Just stick the widest possible screen you can find there, and yeah, that'll do. It looks like an afterthought. Plus, the overall quality in terms of fit and finish and the materials used in here, really, really top notch. In fact, I'll go as far as saying, after a few years and many thousands of kilometers, this interior and these interiors in this generation, I feel they feel more premium than any of the other European competitors. However, when it comes to overall materials and the ability to handle wear and tear, it still can't match a Lexus or a Genesis. But still, there's so much adjustability to the seating position and the passenger position. The seats are an interesting one. Quite a few M340i owners mentioned that while the seats are very supportive, over a really long drive, like a couple of hours, you can get a bit of a numb bum. I've been driving this one a fair bit and I think these seats are fantastic. Again, they're not at Lexus or Genesis levels of, oh my God, but they do a bloody good job. Also, I wish you kind of sank into this interior like you do in an Alfa Romeo. The Giulia just wraps around you like a wonderful Italian bath. This is very, very nice, and you do sit nice and low, but it's not quite as, I don't know, it's not quite as intimate as the Alfa. And then as far as actually using this interior in terms of practicality, okay size glove box there. Spot obviously designed perfectly for your phone with the wireless charger there, and 2 cup holders that, yes, will hold small pretentious coffees. Oh yes, I've been looking for that everywhere. Storage bin there, good sized door bins, spot for life's filth and like sleep and bits of fingernail and dried flesh just there. Little hidden cubby hole here which is felt lined. Nowhere specifically for sunglasses, that's okay. Nothing under the seats as such. That's about it for practicality up front. Okay, then in the back seat, I'm exactly 3 centimeters taller than celebrity 3 Series enthusiast and singer, songwriter and rapper Frank Ocean. This is in my driving position, and it's not too bad. The seats themselves are very, very comfy, but there's not a stack of legroom, not a heap of footroom. Transmission tunnel is huge, so if you're sitting in the middle and the back, that's going to be a bit of a nightmare. It's comfy, also with the dark roof lining, it does feel a little bit claustrophobic. It's nice enough. Then as far as features and practicality go, you've got your own air vents, you've got your own climate control, you've got your own USB-C ports, 2 of them, that's fantastic. Also pull down armrest with a Transformers style cup holder arrangement there. Door bins that you can actually get to when you're sitting in it, which is fantastic. And there's a spot for the kids to fill it with Lego and bits of old food and snot. Then as far as practicality in the boot goes, again, if only this was a wagon, we'd have even more practicality, but this is pretty good. It can fit an adult body and probably a couple of bags of lime and a shovel. Also, the seats fold down, so that's pretty handy, just by these little levers. And then when it comes to complaints and issues with the driving experience, you know what? Not many. A few owners have mentioned that the turning circle isn't fantastic, but that's not really a big one. The transmission, when it's in the Sport Plus mode or the most sporty setting. It can get a little bit confused if you're using it around town. Some of the shifts just get a little bit harsh. And look, even though you should expect, let's say, firm suspension in something wearing an M badge, a few owners did complain that after a few hours of this ride, it just can get a little bit frustrating. And look, even though I personally complained about the fact that there's no M340i wagon available in Australia, even in the lesser 330i form, that thing still has a pretty similar power to weight ratio to a current Subaru WRX and Volkswagen Golf GTI. They're both cars renowned for their performance credentials, yet that sort of power to weight ratio in something with rear wheel drive and a wagon body, that is super impressive. But you know what? That's about it for negatives. How about the positives? Yeah, there's a few. Firstly, in this M340i spec, this engine with the all-drive traction of xDrive, my God, it is incredible for performance. In fact, on public roads, I don't know why anyone would need more power and get up and go than this thing. But the thing is, it's not all just engine. That doesn't dominate the story. The steering, the handling, this adaptive suspension, all excellent. Even when it comes to the boring stuff, which is what you're going to be doing most of the time, like dealing with traffic and trying to find a park somewhere, it just does it so well. It's quiet and refined. It just feels special to drive no matter what the scenario. Even when it comes to fuel consumption, remember, this is a car that will do 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in just over 4 seconds. It can do a 12-second quarter mile, and yet plenty of owners are reporting that they're getting better than 8 litres per 100 Ks. That is so impressive. And you know what? Those are all numbers that the previous generation M3, it can't match. Actually, just on the M3, it's interesting, you know, because that thing's supposed to be the pinnacle of the 3 Series range, but the problem with it is, because it also has to have amazing track ability, it prioritizes performance so much, it almost compromises how nice it is to drive, you know, in the real world. With this thing, because it's prioritizing being great in the real world with some track ability, it actually makes for the nicer car to drive more of the time. In fact, I'll go as far as saying that if you have no intention of ever going to a track day, but you bought an M3, sorry, you bought the wrong car. You should have saved yourself $80,000 and got one of these instead. This is better. That is, if you should buy one of these at all in the first place, because we haven't covered the potential mechanical gremlins, which, let's be honest, BMW don't have a fantastic reputation for. Unfortunately, I can't talk about this because I'm not a qualified mechanic. But you know who is? It's Jim.
Now, as I said at the start, these engines are modular. That means the 3 and the 4 and the 6 cylinder, they share a lot of internal parts like timing chains, pistons and rods, oil filter housings. They share a lot of parts, and they also share a lot of problems. The most common problem you see on these things is oil leaks from the oil filter housing or coolant leaks from that same part. From the factory, they're made of plastic, they're piss weak basically, and they leak a lot. Now, you can buy aftermarket components here that are made of aluminium. They're actually cheaper than the genuine BMW ones, and they last much longer. Similar story with the coolant leaks from the thermostat and the water pump, pretty common problem on these. Because they're direct injection only, they do suffer from a lot of carbon buildup on the valves and inlet ports, and over time that will make them less efficient. So every few years you really will need to clean that out with some type of walnut blast. We do see problems occasionally with the turbos, or to be specific, it's the turbo wastegate actuator. Thankfully you can just change that without changing the whole turbo, and in some cases you can just recalibrate it and that sorts it out. The Valvetronic actuator on these, it fails occasionally. Relatively easy to fix though, and I have seen recently where one of those was leaking oil internally and wicking oil up inside the wiring harness, which created a whole bunch of very random fault codes. So if you're looking at that, have a look in those plugs and check the wiring harness. Now, a lot of these do use oil, so be prepared to top it up regularly. Now, interesting fact about the engine mounts in these, they are often mislabeled and sold in bakeries and cafes as a caramel slice. Now, as you know, when you put anything heavy on a caramel slice, it is not going to last. So you expect to change these things every 50,000 Ks. Now, the timing chains on these, it's not a really common problem like some of the earlier BMWs, but it is a problem. They can rattle, and you'll hear it on cold start mainly. And typically, like a lot of Euro stuff now, the timing chain is at the back of the engine, so you've got to pull the engine, the subframe, the gearbox, a whole lot of it has to come out. So really, you just don't want that at all. So keep a good ear on that and just hope that you never have to do it. Now, as for the M340i, look, that is a pretty popular tuning platform. So if you're looking at one, Just make sure the mods are done right and by a reputable workshop, or actually better still, just don't buy one that's modified. Because regardless of what hype you might hear, any tune on any engine making more horsepower will make it more unreliable. Now the diesels in these, really not very popular, and BMW phased them out. Now the EGR cooler on these is a known problem and they leak internally. So if you're using coolant and you can't see any external leaks, it's likely to be leaking inside the EGR cooler. They do also have problems with their DPFs. Now typically on these it's not the DPF's fault, it's either a blocked map sensor or a boost leak, which are both common problems on these. Look, basically like all Australians, you're just better off avoiding the diesel altogether really. Look, as for the hybrids, there's actually not many of them around and they're really too new to have any long-term reliability statistics. But my tip would be avoid the hybrid. The cost of buying, the cost of repairs, and the long-term unknown reliability prospects, yeah, probably best avoid it. Look, no matter what engine these things have, the biggest problem is the condition-based servicing. Well, that's the long-term service intervals. Basically, forget it. If you want these things to last, you have to service it every 10,000 Ks. It doesn't matter how good the modern oils are, 20, 25,000 Ks service intervals will prematurely wear these engines and make basically a perfectly good car pretty much worthless.
But if you are genuinely looking at spending the $30,000 to $115,000 that the G20 range is currently asking, it's really important to also consider what else you could buy. Obviously, you'll have the predictable German competition like the Audi A4 and S4 and Mercedes-Benz C-Class, but why not also consider the arguably more interesting options like the stunning Alfa Romeo Giulia, the impeccably well-built Lexus IS, or maybe the underdog of this category, the Genesis G70. But no matter which of these you're looking at, or really any car, if you're in the market for car finance, make sure you hit that Driver link down below. Driver will source you the very best finance packages from loads of different lenders. The entire application process is done easily online and it's completely free, and it's going to have no impact on your credit score, and you can get the cash into your account in no time. But when it comes to if you should buy a G20 3 Series at all, okay, look, if you can justify the depreciation and you've got a few $1,000s set aside for that potential rainy day, yeah, you should get one. We'd be avoiding the diesel models because the petrol powered ones are just simply more impressive in every way, and they potentially avoid some of the ongoing maintenance costs. And obviously make sure you do all of your critical pre-purchase inspection checks, but find the right 3 Series, and what a great car. If we had to recommend one specific model, it would actually be this, the M340i, because it offers about 90% of what an M3 can do for potentially thousands and thousands of dollars less, which means it's pretty much all of the car any of us would ever need. However, and there's a chance you and Matt that owns this are gonna hate me saying this, I still don't think this is as good as that. But here's a question for you. If you weren't to buy this or that, what would you buy instead? Let us know in the comments. See you next time. Then as far as features, now the sort of good news with these exterior issues is that they're gonna hate me saying this, I still don't think it's as good as this. I'm just suddenly drunk.